The PC I made last Christmas for my friend's little brothers got back into my hands one way or the other and needed some work done to it. But I saw this as the perfect excuse to try something that I thought would be pretty interesting. So in this video, we will be looking at this $50 GPU from an HP pre-built to see if 2GB of GDDR5 RAM is a good price to pay to game on a budget. The hardware from this PC that I built a little over a year ago is still not too bad for a computer that is under $300. I can't say that the video itself did very well, but I think the PC turned out pretty good at least. The only downside, or weaker part of this system that I mentioned was the GPU, which I spent around $36 on and only got 1GB of GDDR5 RAM along with it, plus some pretty low clock speeds. But that was during the pandemic. So prices have dropped and parts have flooded the market, which allowed me to run into this guy. Introducing the HP Radeon RX 460, a GPU that's clocked at 1090 MHz with a boost to 1200 MHz, and has 2GB of GDDR5 VRAM. Nothing crazy fast, but for this build and the price to performance, it isn't too shabby. The Secret Santa PC needs to be completely rebuilt for this new GPU, however, since the motherboard is completely bugging out currently. So after putting in a B365MA motherboard with an i5-9400F paired with 16GB of 2066 MHz of DDR4 RAM, it should have no bottlenecks for our tests. And what those simple tests are just a handful of games from around the time this GPU was released to stuff released in current day. We will be able to see its potential at the time in 2016 to see what it can do now. The first game that we will be tasting with this GPU is the delectable Arma 3, which came out 3 years before this GPU was even released. I'm using this game since I want to show off how hard the RX 460 has to work with AAA quality, even if it's from a time period before the GPU came out. I also want to make the point that despite the not so high average frame rate, this is fine for a game like this. Most of the action is a lot slower paced and less explodey, which means similarly games like Squad might fare pretty well with similar results. And the kicker here is that this is running at 1080p with max settings essentially, which means you could easily turn down a lot of the stuff to medium to achieve possibly double the frame rate for a good performance. Side note, every game I will be showing will also be running at 1080p. The reason being because I want to show everyone that this card can still be ran hard and have a relatively HD experience across most games today. But enough excess info, let's move on to our next game. Appropriately, Titanfall 2, which ran splendidly despite only having 2GB of VRAM powering it. It looks like it's running on a high-end system, and this was released in 2016. Crazy to think it still looks as good as it does, even with the limited VRAM. I chose this game since while it is a great game to play from the release of this GPU, if you play this at the near average frame rate of 60 frames per second, you can play Apex Legends with very similar performance since these two games are running on the exact same engine. The only difference, really, is that Apex is a free-to-play battle royale, which I think is a great bonus here to consider. The only thing I found to be a problem with this card due to its low VRAM usage was that when you did get close to textures, and I mean right up to your face, they do look a little crusty. But otherwise, this game looks great and plays great too. The next game, Foxhole, a game that has been in the works for years now, finally being quote-unquote officially released, runs alright as well at max settings. Even though its system requirements are quite low, it can still eat up a lot of processing power at times. But as you can see here, it runs no problem for this large-scale MMO World War style game that it is. If there are some large-scale fighting moments, it may drop 5 or even 10 frames at most on average, but honestly, I think it should be fine to play despite that estimate, given how well it runs already. Also, many indie games with this level of graphics should run without any hiccups. And similarly, Risk of Rain 2, which is relatively new, having been released in 2020, runs very decently. And it shouldn't be surprised that it runs as well as it does for its low system requirements either. especially since I got this game to run on the $10 GPU all the way back when I first started this YouTube channel. But more importantly, this is running at 1080p with mostly max settings, which is good to see since I imagine later in the game the frame rate could be chopped in half, but still make this very playable on hardware such as this. As it stands, this video card can run virtually any indie game with relative ease, it seems. The bigger question arising is whether or not the GPU will hold up with current day AAA titles. Which brings us to our last game and most recent game released, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, Warzone 2.0, whatever. I was going to give Cyberpunk 2077 a shot, but something weird happened with that might turn into a video down the line. However, can this video card run Warzone 2.0 at 1080p? Yes. Can it run it on high settings? No. Medium? Not even an option. Low at least, right? Yeah. With decent frame rates? I will leave that up for you to decide. It is playable for me. I can honestly see enemies pretty okay, shoot them, but some people may not see this as a good experience, which I get. I still think an experience is an experience at the end of the day, and for $50 and a free game like this, I don't think there is too many negatives to complain about here. Just note that this is pushing the card to its limits. 80 degrees Celsius is no joke. In the long run, it won't last forever. But getting a taste of AAA games with dirt cheap prices is still a win in my book until you could afford a higher end card. Overall, this is a great budget GPU that you can plug and play with almost any PC. Something I wish new cards would do nowadays since a lot of them are power hungry or require a beefy PSU just to run. One last thing to mention about this card that is similar to the $10 GPU from my first video is that it probably would also make for a good backup video card or troubleshooting GPU when in a pinch. More so than the $10 GPU since the RX 460 still receives driver support. And even more so than a current display GPU that you could buy brand new that costs nearly the same price with the same performance as the $10 GPU. Something that matters a lot when dealing with new games or software. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I really can't believe the amount of attention I've been getting lately, and while this video was a bit short, I wanted to make it as quick as possible to give you guys something to watch until my next few videos start production. Please leave comments about what you would like to see next, questions, anything really. I always like to see what you guys have to say. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and as always, thanks for watching.